Good morning, 3-4s. Today we are continuing to learn to identify the language features used in a narrative. Narrative texts use descriptive language. Remember, the author's purpose is to paint a picture with words so that the readers can imagine what is happening in the story. Some examples of language you might find in a narrative that we'll be focusing on today are a range of verbs. Remember, they're doing words. Nouns to name people, places, or things. Adjectives or adjective phrases to describe nouns. Adverbs or adverbial phrases to describe verbs. Here you can clearly see the different definitions of the 4 key language features that we're going to be focusing on today. So a noun is a person, place, or thing. Adjective describes a noun. We might also find some adjective phrases, and that's going to be a group of adjectives. A verb is a doing word. An adverb describes a verb usually, or it can also describe another adverb or an adjective. And sometimes it might be an adverb, an adverbial group as well. So it's a group of words, not just one word. Here we're just going to take a closer look at adverbial phrases, as these ones we are not so familiar with, as this is something quite new to grade 3-4, whereas nouns, adjectives and verbs you've been learning since prep. So adverbial phrases, they add more meaning to a verb. They can describe how, where, why, or when. And there's a little example here of the gingerbread. So it says the gingerbread man ran. So if we look at how he ran, it says as fast as he could. And that's the adverbial phrase. If we look at where, you could say the gingerbread man ran into the grassy field. Why? The gingerbread man ran because he wanted to escape. When? The gingerbread man ran in the early hours of the morning. So there are 4 examples there of different adverbial phrases, and you can see that it makes our sentence more descriptive and it adds a lot more detail into it for the reader. Here we have an example of the text, the gingerbread man, and you can see that it's got lots of nouns, adjectives, past tense verbs and adverbs, and they're clearly color-coded for you to see. So soon the tiny kitchen smelled of delicious gingerbread. The sweet old woman opened the oven door. All of a sudden, the tasty gingerbread man jumped off the oven tray. He ran out of the door and ran down the long street, with the old woman running tiredly behind. The gingerbread man cried, "You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man." Imagine if those words were not included. It wouldn't be very interesting or engaging. So these language features really help paint a picture in the audience's mind and it allows them to visualize what's going on. I'm now going to read a passage from the book The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. As I'm reading, I really want you to visualize the story in your head and imagine what this would look like if you were in this scene. Whilst listening, I want you to think about as well, what type of words were used in the passage? Why do you think the author chose these types of words? And if these words were removed from the passage, what might be the effect of this? So let's begin. Looking to the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell of fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it was very foolish to shut oneself into any wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found that there was a second row of coats hanging up behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, then 2 or 3 steps, always expecting to feel woodwork against the tips of her fingers. But she could not feel it. This must be a simply enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy. going further in and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for her. Then she noticed that there was something crunching under her feet. I wonder, is that more mothballs, she thought, stooping down to feel it with her hand. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. This is very queer, she said, and went on a step or two further. Next moment she found that she was rubbing against her face and hands was no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. Why, it is just like branches of trees, exclaimed Lucy, and then she saw that there was a light ahead of her, not a few inches away where the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later she found that she was standing in the middle of a wood at night time, with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there, between the dark tree trunks, she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe, and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She had of course left the door open, for she knew that it was a very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe. It seemed to be still daylight there. I can always get back if anything goes wrong, thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch, over the snow and through the woods towards the other light. In about 10 minutes she reached it and found it was a lamp post. As she stood looking at it, wondering why there was a lamp post in the middle of a wood and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter-patter of feet coming towards her, and soon after that a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamp post. Hopefully, after carefully listening to the passage from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, you notice that the author used a lot of nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs to really create a descriptive text. The author used these words to help you as an audience to visualize the story in your head and to use all your senses to paint that picture. By using these descriptive language features, they really are entertaining you, and that's the whole purpose of writing a narrative, to entertain and really to engage you and grab your attention. Here are a few examples that you would have heard whilst I was reading. So some nouns were coats, wardrobe, lampposts, mothballs, trees, snowflakes. Some adjectives: long, foolish, enormous, dark, rough, hard, smooth, inquisitive, prickly, powdery, cold, open. And remember, our adjectives, they were describing some of our nouns. Some verbs, which were the doing words, often used in past tense in a narrative: hanging, rubbed, crunching, thought, stooping down, exclaimed, wondering, looked, found. And you can see that they've used words like exclaimed, wondering, instead of words like said. Not once did they mention the word said in that text. Some adverbs to describe the verbs used in the passage were immediately, amongst the coats, further in, quite dark, against the tips of her fingers, in about 10 minutes. Now, using all this information, it's your turn to write a descriptive passage for a text. Good luck, guys, and enjoy today's activity.